Ever wonder just how much your upbringing actually like shaped how well you did in school?
Hmm.
Like did your parents' style influence your grades and all that?
Hmm.
Well, someone sent us a whole bunch of research on this,
Oh, wow.
and we took a deep dive into a meta-analysis that looked at hundreds of studies on this very topic.
A
So,
meta-analysis, for folks who might not be familiar,
yeah,
it's basically like a giant study of other studies.
right.
It takes a ton of research projects, puts them all together,
Combines them all.
and sees if there are like overall patterns.
Right.
This particular meta-analysis that we're looking at today was done by Martin Kinkart back in 2016.
Yeah.
And they looked at 308 individual studies,
Wow.
all examining the link between, general parenting styles
Right.
and how kids perform academically.
So everything from like report card grades to those standardized achievement tests.
Exactly. All those different measures of how well kids are doing in school. And they were really interested in seeing, okay, across all these studies, what kind of patterns emerge?
So for you, the learner listening in, your mission, if you choose to accept it, and you already have by sending us these sources,
Right.
is to get a clear, concise understanding of what this huge amount of research tells us about the impact of parenting.
Right.
We're going to try to cut through all the statistics and highlight the really interesting aha moments and the key takeaways so you can feel really well informed
Yeah.
without getting, bogged down in all the details.
Yeah.
So this research looks at a bunch of different aspects of parenting,
Yeah.
like how warm and responsive parents are, how much they express love and affection and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the different ways they try to exert control over their kids' behavior.
Right, because there are lots of different ways to be a controlling parent.
Totally.
And this meta-analysis is really careful about distinguishing between what they call proactive behavioral control, which is more about setting clear expectations, routines, boundaries,
Right.
like guidelines and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Versus harsh control, which is more about, punishment, yelling, those kinds of things.
Okay, so like positive guidance versus
Yeah.
more negative punishment.
Exactly.
Got it.
They also looked at psychological control, which is a bit more insidious,
Right.
where parents try to manipulate their kids' emotions, like using guilt or withdrawing love to get them to behave.
Oh, that's tricky.
Yeah, it can be really damaging.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they looked at how much parents encourage their kids to be independent.
To like make their own choices, think for themselves, all that.
Exactly. That whole autonomy piece.
Okay, so we've got warmth, different types of control, and autonomy.
Right. Those are kind of the core dimensions they were looking at.
Got it. Now, to make things even more interesting, the research also organizes parents into 4 main styles
Okay.
based on how they score on these dimensions.
Yeah.
So first, we have the authoritative parenting style. This is often seen as kind of like the gold standard.
Yeah. It's a high warmth, high control, but that control is more of the proactive, supportive kind.
Right, so it's about setting clear expectations, but also being warm and responsive to the child's needs.
Exactly. Then you've got authoritarian parenting, which is high control, but low warmth.
So lots of rules and expectations, but not a lot of emotional support and understanding.
Right, more strict and rigid. Then we have permissive parents who are all about the warmth, but don't set many rules.
So high on love and affection, low on limits and boundaries.
And finally, there's neglectful parenting, which is low on both warmth and control.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's the style that tends to have the most negative outcomes for kids.
Right, because those kids are really missing out on both the emotional support and the guidance they need.
Exactly.
So we've laid out all these different dimensions and styles of parenting. What does this meta-analysis actually tell us about how they relate to academic achievement?
Well, when we look at the overall associations across hundreds of studies, some interesting patterns definitely emerge.
Lay it on us.
So first off, we see these small but consistent positive links between parental responsiveness, that warmth we were talking about,
Okay.
and kids' academic achievement.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Kids who feel loved and supported probably do better in school.
Right. And these links are seen both concurrently, meaning at the same time,
Okay.
and longitudinally, meaning over time.
Oh, interesting. So there's a connection both in the short term and the long term.
Exactly. Now, to be a little more specific about the strength of these links, they use what are called correlation coefficients, which they represent with the letter R.
Okay, I remember those from stats class.
Yeah, good times. Not really, but go on. So an R value close to 0 means there's pretty much no relationship between the two things.
Yeah.
But the closer you get to 1, or -1 for negative relationships, the stronger the connection is.
Got it.
So for parental responsiveness and academic achievement, the correlation coefficients they found were R.14 concurrently
Okay.
and R.17 longitudinally.
So those are positive correlations, but they're not huge.
Right, they're considered small effect sizes. But here's the thing. Even small effects, when they show up consistently across hundreds of studies,
Right.
tell us something important.
May suggest there's a real pattern there.
Exactly. Now, for the learner, this means that while your parents' warmth and responsiveness likely played a role in your school success,
Right.
it's not the only factor.
It's just one piece of the puzzle.
Exactly.
Okay, so a little bit of warmth goes a little way in helping with those grades and test scores.
It seems so.
What about control? Like, does being a bit more controlling actually help kids academically?
Well, when it comes to behavioral control, that proactive kind,
Okay.
it also shows a small positive association with achievement, both concurrently and longitudinally.
Interesting. So setting clear expectations and boundaries might actually be beneficial.
That's what the data suggests. The R value for both concurrent and longitudinal associations was 0.11.
Okay, so similar to warmth, a small but consistent effect.
Exactly. And then there's autonomy granting, encouraging kids to be independent. That also had a positive link to academic outcomes.
Oh, that's interesting. You'd think maybe too much freedom might lead to kids slacking off, right?
You might think that.
Yeah.
But actually, the research found that when parents support their kids' autonomy in the right way,
Okay.
it seems to help them develop those self-regulation skills, that ability to manage their own learning and behavior.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between guidance and independence.
Exactly. And in terms of the correlations, autonomy granting had a concurrent R value of 0.11 and a longitudinal R value of 0.15.
Okay, so a slightly stronger link over time. It seems like fostering independence might have a cumulative effect.
It could be. Now, bringing it back to those parenting styles, it probably won't surprise you that the authoritative style,
The one with the warmth and the proactive control.
that one comes out on top.
Makes sense.
It shows a small but consistent positive association with academic achievement, both concurrently, R 0.17, and longitudinally, R 0.15.
So if you want to raise a straight-A student, just be authoritative.
If only it were that simple.
Right,
Like we said, no single parenting style is a magic bullet.
right. Kids are complicated.
They are.
But still, these findings are pretty compelling.
They are. I mean, the fact that these small effects are consistently seen across hundreds of studies
Yeah.
gives us more confidence that these patterns are real and worth paying attention to.
So while no parenting style guarantees academic success, it's clear that these approaches do have some influence.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about the flip side now. What kind of parenting might actually hinder academic success, according to this massive study?
Well, as you might expect, the less supportive parenting practices
Right.
tend to have negative associations with achievement.
Okay.
So, for example, harsh parental control, things like frequent punishment and yelling,
Yeah,
showed a small but consistent negative link to academic achievement.
that makes sense. If you're constantly being punished or yelled at, you probably don't feel very motivated to learn.
Right. And you might even start to resent school altogether.
Yeah, I can see that.
The concurrent correlation for harsh control was RA 0.16, and the longitudinal correlation was RA 0.13.
Okay, so again, a small effect, but consistent over time.
Exactly. Now, psychological control, that sneaky kind of control we talked about earlier,
The guilt tripping and stuff.
yeah, that one also had a negative association with achievement.
Okay.
And what's really interesting here is that this association actually gets stronger over time.
Oh, wow. That's kind of scary.
It is a bit concerning.
So even if it doesn't immediately tank your grades, it can have a longer-term negative impact.
That's what the data suggests.
Wow.
The concurrent correlation for psychological control was RA 0.11,
Okay.
but longitudinally it jumped to RA 0.23.
That's a pretty big difference.
It is, and it really highlights how that subtle erosion of self-worth through psychological manipulation can really have a compounding effect on academic engagement over time.
So it's like a slow burn, but the effects can be pretty significant in the long run.
Exactly. It's not just about the immediate impact.
Now, what about the other parenting styles that weren't authoritative? Like the authoritarian, permissive, and neglectful ones.
Right. So neglectful parenting, unfortunately, showed the strongest negative association with academic achievement.
That's not surprising. If kids aren't getting the support and guidance they need at home, it's going to show up in their schoolwork.
Exactly. The concurrent correlation for neglectful parenting was RGES 0.15. However, the longitudinal link wasn't statistically significant in this meta-analysis.
Okay, so we see a clear negative connection in the short term, but we need more research to see if that holds up over time.
Right. Now, authoritarian parenting, the high control, low warmth style, also had a small negative concurrent association with achievement, RAGE 0.09, but again, no significant long-term effect was found.
Okay, so similar to neglectful parenting, more research is needed on the long-term effects.
Exactly. And lastly, permissive parenting showed the weakest negative concurrent link, RE-0.05, and no significant longitudinal association either.
So it seems like the absence of something positive, like warmth in authoritarian parenting or control in permissive, has a less negative impact than actively negative behaviors like harsh or psychological control or outright neglect.
That's a really good way to put it. It's not just about what's missing, but also about what's actively harmful.
Right. And just to be clear, all these effect sizes we've been talking about, they're statistically significant,
Right.
which means they're unlikely to be due to just random chance.
Exactly, especially given the huge number of studies they analyze.
But they're still generally considered small.
Right.
But again, the fact that these small associations consistently appear across so many different studies really strengthens the case that these patterns are meaningful.
Exactly. It's that consistency that makes them so compelling.
And you mentioned earlier that neglectful parenting seemed to have a more negative impact than authoritarian and permissive.
Yes, that was something the researchers specifically pointed out. They found that the confidence intervals...
Now remind me what those are again.
So confidence intervals are basically a range of values
Right.
where we're pretty confident the true effect lies.
Okay.
And what they found was that the confidence intervals for the association between neglectful parenting and academic achievement didn't overlap with those of authoritarian and permissive styles.
So that means there's a clear distinction between neglectful parenting and the other two styles.
Exactly. It suggests that neglect has a more detrimental link to academic outcomes
Right.
compared to those other less than ideal parenting styles.
Okay, so we're starting to see these connections between parenting styles and academic achievement. But I'm curious about what's actually going on beneath the surface. Like, why would warmth, control, or autonomy lead to better grades?
Right.
What's the mechanism here?
Yeah, that's the big question. And the researchers discussed several potential mediating factors.
Okay, break that down for us. What do you mean by mediating factors?
So mediating factors are basically the things that explain how one thing influences another.
Okay, so they're like the middlemen in the relationship between parenting and grades.
Exactly.
Got it.
And the researchers suggest that things like a student's motivation to achieve, their self-efficacy beliefs, and their capacity for self-regulation might be some of those crucial middlemen.
Okay, let's unpack those one by one. What is achievement motivation?
It's basically how driven a student is to succeed in school.
Okay, so some kids are just naturally more motivated than others.
It seems so, and that can be influenced by a lot of things, including their parenting experiences.
Got it. What about self-efficacy?
Self-efficacy is all about a student's belief in their own ability to succeed.
So it's like how confident they are in their own skills and intelligence.
Exactly, and research shows that self-efficacy is a really powerful predictor of academic achievement.
That makes sense. If you believe you can do it, you're more likely to try harder and persevere when things get tough.
Exactly. And then there's self-regulation, which is like your ability to manage your own learning and behavior.
So things like planning your work, staying focused, and motivating yourself.
Exactly, like having your own internal study buddy.
I love that analogy. So how do these mediating factors connect back to the different parenting dimensions?
Well, for starters, parental responsiveness, that warmth and support,
Right.
is thought to foster a greater interest in school and what's called a learning goal orientation.
Okay, explain that one.
So a learning goal orientation means that you're focused on understanding and mastering the material
Okay.
rather than just getting good grades or outperforming others.
So it's more about the process of learning itself, not just the outcome.
Exactly. And kids who have that learning goal orientation tend to be more engaged and persistent in their studies.
Makes sense. And parental warmth helps promote that.
Exactly. If you feel supported and valued by your parents, you're more likely to see learning as something worthwhile in itself, rather than just a means to an end.
It's like, hey, I'm valued for who I am, so learning new things is exciting and valuable too.
Yeah, something like that.
Now, what about proactive behavioral control? How does that fit in?
So that's linked to parents having high expectations for their children's academic performance.
Huh?
And it's also about encouraging goal-directed behavior and even reducing things like truancy, skipping school.
Right, because obviously if you're not in class, you're not going to learn much.
Exactly. So if parents are actively monitoring their kids' behavior, setting clear expectations, and providing that structure, it creates a more supportive environment for academic success.
It's like they're building a scaffold for the kids to climb on.
I like that. A scaffold of support.
But then harsh control seems to have the opposite effect.
It does.
Why is that?
Well, with harsh control, there's a risk that kids will start to reject their parents' academic standards altogether.
It's like a rebellion against all those rules and punishments.
Exactly. They might become resentful, disengaged, and less likely to internalize the importance of school.
Yeah, it's like, if you're just going to punish me no matter what I do, why bother trying?
Right. It can create this sense of hopelessness.
And we talked about psychological control earlier. Remind me again how that messes with academic achievement.
So psychological control through guilt and manipulation can really distract from the cognitive support that kids need to learn.
Okay.
Parents who use these tactics might be more focused on their child's emotional state and their own need for control,
Right.
rather than providing the clear, rational advice and support that's needed for academic progress.
Like their emotional needs are overshadowing the child's learning needs.
Exactly. And it can also lead to emotional impulsivity in kids, making it harder for them to focus and stay on task.
So they're more reactive and less able to regulate their emotions.
Right. And that can obviously interfere with their ability to learn effectively.
Now, autonomy granting, we talked about how it's linked to self-regulation,
Mm-hmm.
but could you elaborate on that a bit more?
Sure. So when parents appropriately support the child's autonomy,
Right.
it helps them develop those crucial self-management skills. They become more capable of setting their own goals, staying on track, and motivating themselves.
It's like they're learning to be their own internal motivator.
Exactly. And this is in contrast to parental overcontrol, which can actually hinder the development of these skills.
So it's like if parents are constantly hovering and micromanaging, the kids never learn to do it for themselves.
Right. They become dependent on that external control.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the authoritative parenting style, the one that seems so beneficial?
Yeah.
What's the magic combination there?
So with the authoritative style, that blend of warmth and high but supportive demandingness, it seems to be linked to what researchers call adaptive achievement strategies.
Okay, break that down for us.
Adaptive achievement strategies are basically ways of approaching learning and challenges that are more likely to lead to success.
Okay.
So kids raised with this style tend to have a lower fear of failure.
That's huge.
It is. They're less likely to engage in task-irrelevant behavior,
Yeah.
getting distracted and off track.
Yeah.
And they're more likely to be proactive in their problem-solving and critical thinking.
So they believe they can succeed, and they're willing to put in the effort to figure things out.
Exactly. They have that growth mindset.
Okay, and what about the less effective styles? How do they play out in terms of learning strategies?
Well, adolescents with neglectful parents, unfortunately, tend to show more maladaptive achievement strategies.
So the opposite of adaptive.
Yeah, basically. They might have high levels of task-irrelevant behavior and passivity.
So they're more likely to get distracted, give up easily, and just not really engage with their learning.
Exactly. They might lack the motivation and support to really take ownership of their education.
And what about authoritarian and permissive styles?
So, as we've talked about, each of those styles seems to be missing a key ingredient.
Right. Authoritarian is missing the warmth, and permissive is missing the control.
Exactly. So, with authoritarian parents, kids might have high expectations placed on them,
Okay.
but without that warmth and support,
Right.
their motivation might be driven more by fear than by a genuine interest in learning.
It's like they're studying to avoid punishment, not because they actually care about the material.
Exactly. And with permissive parents, kids might have all the love and acceptance in the world,
Okay.
but without those consistent boundaries and expectations, they might lack the structure and self-discipline they need to really excel academically.
So they might have the potential, but they're not developing the skills and habits to reach it.
Right. It's like having all the ingredients for a cake, but not knowing how to bake it.
That's a great analogy.
Mhm.
Okay, this is all really fascinating, but sometimes it feels like what happens at school is way more important than what goes on at home when it comes to academics. Does this research shed any light on that?
It does. It's really interesting. This meta-analysis actually emphasizes that the associations between these general parenting styles and academic achievement
Okay.
tend to be smaller than the associations found in other meta-analyses that look specifically at school-related parental involvement.
So things like helping with homework, attending parent-teacher conferences, being more directly involved in their kids' schooling.
Exactly. That direct academic support seems to have a more immediate and potentially stronger impact on achievement.
So while a generally supportive home environment is definitely helpful, actively engaging in a child's schooling might be the more powerful lever when it comes to academic success.
That seems to be the case, and it's something for parents and educators to really consider.
Yeah, because you might have the warmest, most loving home in the world, but if you're not also actively involved in your kids' education,
Right.
they might not be reaching their full potential.
Exactly. It's about that combination of general support and targeted involvement.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about how parenting affects achievement,
Mm-hmm.
but could it go the other way?
Oh, that's a great question.
Could a child's academic performance actually influence how their parents behave?
That's a crucial question, and this meta-analysis did try to explore those bidirectional relationships through what's called cross-lagged analysis.
Okay, I'm going to need you to break that down for me.
Of course. So cross-lagged analysis is a statistical technique that allows researchers to look at how two variables influence each other over time.
So instead of just seeing if there's a correlation at one point in time,
Right.
they're looking at how things unfold over multiple points in time.
Exactly. And what they found was pretty fascinating. They found that parental warmth, behavioral control, autonomy granting, and that overall authoritative parenting style actually predicted increases in academic achievement over time.
Okay, so that supports the idea that parenting does have a real impact on how well kids do in school.
Right. But here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay, I'm all ears.
They also found that harsh and psychological control, as well as neglectful parenting, predicted decreases in achievement over time.
So those negative parenting practices actually seem to lead to worse academic outcomes down the line.
Exactly. Which really highlights the importance of addressing those negative patterns early on.
Absolutely. Now, what about the reverse relationship?
Well, they found something pretty remarkable there, too. They found that better initial academic achievement was actually associated with increases in parental warmth and behavioral control over time.
So when kids do well in school, their parents might respond with more warmth and support.
That's what the data suggests. It's like a positive feedback loop. Success breeds more positive parenting.
That's really interesting. It completely changes how we usually think about this, doesn't it?
It does.
It's not just parents acting on their kids,
Right.
but kids also shaping their parents' behavior.
Exactly. It's a dynamic interplay, not a one-way street.
Now, you mentioned earlier that the strength of these connections between parenting and achievement can vary depending on a number of factors.
Yeah, there are definitely some nuances here.
What are some of those factors that might make these links stronger or weaker?
So one factor is age.
Okay, makes sense. As kids get older, you'd expect their parents' influence to change.
Exactly. And what they found was that the associations of autonomy granting and authoritarian parenting with academic achievement were weaker in older adolescents.
So teenagers might be less responsive to those particular parenting styles.
It seems so. And this likely reflects the fact that as teenagers get older, they naturally seek more independence, and their peers start to have a much bigger influence on them.
It's that whole individuation thing.
Exactly. They're
Yeah.
figuring out who they are and what they believe in,
Yeah.
and their friends become a really important reference point.
Okay, what about ethnicity? Did they find any differences there?
This is an interesting one. They found that the associations of autonomy granting and authoritative parenting with academic achievement were weaker in samples with more participants from ethnic minorities,
Okay.
specifically in Western countries.
So cultural background seems to play a role.
It does, and the researchers suggest that this could be due to cultural differences in the value and timing of autonomy.
So what's considered appropriate or effective in one culture might not be the same in another.
Exactly, and that's something to be really mindful of when we're talking about parenting and its effects.
Absolutely. We can't just assume that one size fits all.
Right.
Now, were there any differences based on how they measured academic achievement?
Yes, actually. They found that psychological control had a stronger negative association with achievement test scores compared to GPA.
Oh, that's interesting. So it had a bigger impact on standardized tests than on grades.
That's what the data suggests. And this could be because standardized achievement tests are seen as a more objective measure of academic performance.
Right. They're standardized, so there's less room for subjectivity or bias.
Exactly. Whereas grades can be influenced by a lot of factors, like the
Yes.
teacher's personality, the school's grading system, all sorts of things.
So it's possible that those more objective measures are picking up on a stronger underlying relationship between psychological control and achievement.
That's one interpretation.
Okay, what about the parents themselves? Did the mother's approach have a different impact than the father's?
Well, when it came to parental gender, they found that maternal warmth had a stronger positive association with girls' academic achievement compared to paternal warmth.
Interesting. So mom's warmth seems to be especially important for daughters.
It seems so. However, they didn't find that same difference for boys.
So for boys, both mom's and dad's warmth seem to matter equally.
Right. Now, this finding could relate to a lot of things, like traditional gender roles or the dynamics of same-sex parent-child relationships,
Right.
but more research is definitely needed to really understand what's going on there.
Yeah, it's a complex issue.
It is.
Now, what about who was reporting on the parenting and the achievement? Did that make a difference?
It did. They found some interesting differences there. So, for example, behavioral control showed a stronger positive association when it was reported by the children themselves
Okay.
compared to when parents reported it.
So the kid's perception of their parents' control mattered more than the parents' own perception.
Exactly, which makes sense, right? It's the child's experience that ultimately shapes their behavior.
Right. It's not just about what the parents are doing, but about how the kids are interpreting it.
Exactly. And they also found that warmth and autonomy support showed stronger positive associations when they were rated by observers.
So like someone outside the family who was watching the interactions.
Right, like a researcher or a teacher, for example.
Interesting. So a more objective perspective might be picking up on things that parents and kids themselves aren't aware of.
That's possible. And then they found that psychological control had a stronger negative association with achievement when academic achievement was reported by researchers through standardized tests,
Right.
rather than by the children themselves through their grades.
So again, that suggests those more objective measures might be revealing something that's not as obvious in the subjective reports.
Exactly. It's like we're getting different angles on the same picture.
And all those different angles can be really helpful in understanding the full complexity of the situation.
Exactly.
Okay, what about the quality of the research itself? Did the studies with stronger methods show different results?
They did. They found that studies that provided strong evidence for the validity and reliability of their parenting measures actually found weaker associations between parental warmth and academic achievement.
Oh, that's surprising. You'd think better research would lead to stronger effects.
You would, but in this case, it seems like the weaker associations might actually be more accurate.
So it's possible that some of the earlier studies that didn't have such strong measures might have overestimated the effect of warmth.
That's one possibility. And on the flip side, they found that psychological control had a stronger negative association with achievement when the academic measure was well validated.
So again, better research, stronger effect.
Exactly. And this just highlights the importance of using really robust measurement tools when we're studying these complex relationships.
Absolutely. You can't get good data without good tools.
Exactly.
And finally, did they find any evidence of publication bias?
They did. They found that behavioral control and neglectful parenting showed stronger associations in published studies compared to unpublished ones.
So studies that found those stronger links might have been more likely to get published.
Exactly. Which isn't surprising, right? Journals tend to favor studies with more exciting or significant findings.